بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على النبي الكريم وبعد. Honorable brothers and sisters, we've been announcing and advertising this program for over 3 weeks now, alhamdulillah, almost 2 weeks actually. Subhanallah, just ask yourself this question, you are a doctor and you're not in any, you're not in a normal surgery, you are actually surrounded by rocket launches, bombs, and you could get any minute raided by the IDF, and you also have to treat your patient. It's very difficult to even mention this. But subhanallah, we have a brother, and not only him, there are many other doctors, mashallah. To me, I said to you various times here, I've done a khutbah 3 months ago, and I said, if you really want to see the real heroes, then make dua for those doctors who are actually risking their lives, literally trying to save their lives. They are the real heroes. We pray for them. If you remember, so many brothers. And subhanallah, we're very lucky to have Dr. Mustafa here. Very short inshallah. These questions are very difficult to ask. We're going to ask him this question, and it's not easy for him to answer because he's literally there. So many times, when we know that the people are dying, you get one of the members of IDF coming and goes, Allah, nobody's dying, everyone's happy. There's somebody there, literally, who don't know. This is one of the meetings that he said that there were many times where he actually has to put a child or a baby in the bag and give it to their parents. So that they don't even know where to take to bury them. This is not easy. Okay, but subhanallah, Muslim Ummah is so strong. We need to continue. We have hope, and we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we don't give up because the decision is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just think about Muhammad. Can you imagine from 950 years in da'wah, okay, and nobody is listening to him. After 950 years, Allah says, وَمَا نَعْمَعَهُ إِلَّا قَلِيلٌ. Only a handful of people believed in him. Abdullah bin Abbas said, I'll tell you when you only about 81. In 950 years, 81 people embraced Islam. According to Abdullah bin Abbas. Think about this. But did you find ever in any verse of Allah gave up vocabulary? No. It's a Rabbi in da'wah, day and night. فَلَمْ يَزِدْهُمْ دُعَائِي إِلَّا فِرَارًا. I invited them and they just ran away from me. But I continued. And when Allah sent the revelation, he said, no one will be myself. That's what he said. This was Allah, in that case, get rid of all those diseases from this earth. So anyway, as Muslims always said that we don't give up, we continue to pray inshallah ta'ala, but we are very fortunate, very lucky inshallah ta'ala. We have Dr. Mustafa here, he was there, he witnessed everything. They say getting information from their sources is not that you see your own eyes. Someone who was there, Ayn al-Yaqeen. You have Ilm al-Yaqeen, Ayn al-Yaqeen, Haqq al-Yaqeen. Somebody was there, and this is very important. And we believe in him, the reliable person, comes from a Muslim background. His father was a very respected physician, and he's in the masjid. This is something that we can believe and we can take, and then can we do something? That's the most important thing. Is there something that we can do? Is there any way that we can help our Muslim Ummah? Because the Prophet said, we are like one body. If one eye hurt, the whole body should hurt. And if you don't feel like this, then you need to ask yourself the question, do I believe global Ummah? Why is it that, if somebody is dying somewhere, a Muslim person that Allah, and he doesn't hurt me, I mean, there's something wrong with my iman. So inshallah, I'm not going to take too long when I invite the senior fundraiser for Islamic belief. I'm going to ask you to introduce our guest, inshallah. If I could request our honorable doctor to come forward, inshallah, just to make you Takbir! Takbir! Sorry, doctor, I said that you are a hero. And that's how we are feeling, inshallah. Welcome.
Mustafa is Allah, the King of Kings, the universe, all knowing, all hearing, all seeing, and we send peace and salutations upon the best of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We ask Allah to bless him, his house, his companions, and all those who follow. Say Ameen. Respected brothers and elders, we are joined by a real-life hero, Dr. Mohammed Mustafa. He's a British Palestinian emergency doctor, humanitarian, also a former rugby player, and the first Palestinian to represent the UK in international rugby. Born into a refugee family, he trained across the UK and Australia, driven that belief is a healthcare that is basic human right. In 2024 and 2025, Dr. Mohammed served in Gaza's hospitals under bombardment, providing emergency care and sharing powerful updates that hit millions. Now that Dr. Mohammed Mustafa is back in the UK, he has never stopped advocating for the rights of Palestinians and ensuring that there is safety, protection, and healthcare in war zones. He's also joined by Robert T, who's the national fundraising manager at Islamic, a man that has been involved in fundraising for many years. That's what I say. And I'll pass it over to you.
Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala session for however long it will be to be a means of benefit for us, Ameen, and allow us to gain closer to our Lord through this discussion, Ameen. Let's start by introducing our guests for the Muslim. I didn't know this. I didn't know already. So our dear Sheikh gave a beautiful introduction, as I got into that. I wanted to ask a question to you, Muhammad. Just first of all, just tell us a little bit about yourself, background, people may not know what your heritage is, and then just a little bit about your kind of medical journey. I think it's good to give a context to that before we go into more discussion.
Thank you very much. Originally, I'm from Gaza. My dad was from Gaza. I was born in Mecca. Moved over to the UK when I was 4 years old. I grew up here, and then obviously watched my father from the doctor. Being Arabic, there's only 3 options in the house: doctor, engineer, options that my dad had. So, alhamdulillah, I became a doctor, went to university in Liverpool, worked in Scotland, and then I went over to Australia. Reason why I went over to Australia, emergency training over there is a lot more complete. You do a lot more things over there, and I wanted to do this kind of work. I wanted to work in emergency medicine and natural disasters, war zones, and that's where I went. I went to Australia, and I was training there. And then obviously the conflict started in Gaza, and I put my name on straight away to go, and it took months to get approval to go in. It took months for someone just to take me in. It's a very difficult process, and then once you even get approved to go in, you have to go through Israeli clearance as well, which is another layer as well. And you're never guaranteed, even when you get all the yeses and you arrive in Jordan, and you get told maybe a few hours before the bus leaves whether you're allowed to go into Gaza or not. And before Rafah was invaded, you'd go in through Egypt. And even then, it was very, very difficult to go through there.
Yeah, that was a question I was going to ask. So given your experience, obviously you studied medicine and then you wanted to go into emergency medicine and then you saw what was unfolding in your homeland. I wanted to ask the question, like, it's easy to, maybe the first reply is like, why did you want to go to Gaza? But why did you want to go? And talk us through how difficult it was for you as a medical professional and how difficult it is for others to get in.
I think everyone over here has seen on your phone, TV, about it. Like many people, I felt helpless, felt powerless. And talking about it wasn't enough. Protesting wasn't enough. I wanted to go to my actual hands, and I wanted to go there and help on the ground. Obviously, making that decision was very difficult to make because I knew the dangers that came with going there. The first time that I went there, if you remember, May 2024 was when Israel bombed the World Trade Center. They killed 3 British servicemen there. And we were the first group of international workers to enter Gaza after the invasion. My mum obviously felt a lot of tension going in, and I felt the same as well because it's obvious after the invasion happened where this conflict is now beginning to head, and they are beginning to head to the final kind of not only is it difficult to get into Gaza, there's no safety at all. There's no guarantee. Now we're there, that's the this time round. On the hospital, while we were there, they bombed the hospital. They executed the paramedics who were there. They bombed the UN safe house, killed international aid workers while I was there. And even when we were leaving Gaza, we were in the UN convoy for me. Even the UN guys were telling us, like, there is no guaranteed safety, even in the UN convoy that we leave the way out of Gaza, that we're actually.
Many of us have seen from October the 7th onwards, I mean, many of us have been watching for decades the human rights abuses, but particularly since October the 7th, we were seeing on our screens, untold horror. There was a period where there was what we can call it a temporary ceasefire, right? There was a period where there was a lot more aid that was able to get in. And you've been to Gaza twice, but the recent trip that you went on, you actually went during the ceasefire. I believe it was during Ramadan. And we'll talk a little bit more about what happened when the ceasefire broke. But can you tell us about what was it like during that ceasefire period? What memories and stories of Gaza can you give here? Do a mic switch so that perhaps maybe some people can't hear at the back. It's always better with a microphone, I think.
Hello? So, when I entered Gaza this time around, I entered during the ceasefire, and there was a lot of hope in the air. This was a few days after the official first phase of the ceasefire was over, so they were meant to go into phase 2. But I knew going into Gaza that this ceasefire was a fake ceasefire and it was not going to hold. I think we all saw there was about 150 people killed during the ceasefire. And even during the ceasefire, we would have children that would come in that were shot in the head by snipers, shot in the head with drones, sometimes at night when they were asleep. And, we had the images, but the bullet trajectory would be downwards. Now, what that meant was it meant that there was a drone over their head and it would target them and shoot them in the head. And when these families would come in, they would tell us that the drone would only fire one shot, and usually it was at the youngest child. The youngest child. They'd be walking as a whole family, and it would be the youngest child that would be targeted. And, there have been reports as well that Israeli soldiers have been having games of which youngest child can they kill, how young a child that they can kill. And we were seeing that during the ceasefire. It was very tense even during the ceasefire. I think the day before the ceasefire broke, we had a mass casualty event. We had 10 people that were killed from a missile drone strike. It was a journalist and all of his colleagues. And that was the day before the ceasefire broke.
SubhanAllah. This was during a supposed ceasefire and a time when the aerial bombardment was not as much as it was when it broke. And before we talk about that moment when the ceasefire broke, and I know you were there, you documented it, part of the reason that a lot of people heard your story was because you were there at the time. But can you share a story, maybe a fond memory that you had during that time, during the temporary ceasefire? Of course, the situation was as bad as you said, but perhaps there are some fond memories that show the hope of the people of Gaza during that period that you could share with us.
We would, at night, people would stop coming to the emergency department at night unless there was a bombing. Because during the ceasefire, there wasn't many of them going on at night. And we would then leave the hospital grounds at about 11 o'clock and we would go walk the streets of Gaza. And I was in Gaza City, I was in the north. And we walked for about 2 miles and we got to an ice cream shop. And it was like the only ice cream shop that was still standing. And subhanAllah, there were queues round the corner. And when you'd get in to have ice cream, people were playing the drums, they were singing, they were dancing outside, and you could really feel a very lively atmosphere. We would go after we would do Taraweeh. We would always go looking for ice cream after Taraweeh. That was our routine. We'd go to the mosque, we'd pray, and then we would go and look for ice cream with all the locals. And because we would walk and we would have our NGO jackets on, they knew we were foreigners. So they would always stop us and they would give us, kakib tamir and sweets and things like that they would make, all the street sellers, and they would refuse to take money from us, even though, I know how much they needed it. And sometimes we would leave money on the desk and run, and then they would chase us. And it got to a stage where so many people were chasing us to give us back our money. And I'm not the smallest guy. I'm not going to outrun them. So, they ended up giving us all these sweets for free, and they refused to take money. So that was kind of like the spirit of the Palestinian people there, that they just wanted to welcome us into Gaza while we were there.
You shared a beautiful story, really, which really shows that the strength and the honor of the people of Gaza as well. And just another question I wanted to ask, because you got to see a lot more during the period of the ceasefire about outside of the emergency department. I know when it broke, you were in there a lot more. Did you see anything of Islamic relief when you were out in Gaza as well?
You know, when you go out to the markets in Gaza, look, Gaza is very, very complicated, right? There's obviously a lot of aid that goes into Gaza, but there's a lot of people that take the aid and then sell it. And that's why you hear about these skyrocketed prices. You know, getting free aid distribution is actually quite difficult. Most of the time, people steal aid and they sell it to certain people that are in control of that, certain gangs that are in control of that. And when there would be areas that there would be food distribution, there were some well-known ones. World Central Kitchen was one of them. Islamic Relief was another one of them. These were dependable, free food, but getting free food in Gaza is very difficult. And this is why the hunger that you see in Gaza as well, it's not just siege, it's also within Gaza as well. People also deliberately not giving food as well to people. So, you know, these people in Gaza, they have got a million ways in which they are dealing with the catastrophe. You know, just a few days ago, the Israeli defense minister said none of them are allowed to go into the water, even to bathe. And they've said that because it's summer over there, like 40 degrees, and there's no running water. So going into the sea would cool them down. They're not even allowing them to go into the sea just to cool down. So, you know, when you think about Gaza, there's a 360 view of what they do. They sometimes at night, they bring these quadcopter drones, and these drones, they have speakers on them, and sometimes they would make the sound of crying children. And they would do that to lure people out, and then it would shoot them. This happens all the time in Gaza. The warfare is psychological. It's hunger, it's bombs, it's bullets. And these people have so much that they have to deal with. It's not just the bombs and the starvation, it's everything else. There's psychological warfare. The amount of times that we were in Gaza and leaflets would be dropped. And on these leaflets, sometimes they would have ayat of Quran, would talk against them. Sometimes these words would say to them that the Arab world brings you shrouds while it gives us money and weapons. Nobody is here for you. You're alone. This is the psychological warfare that they used to do while we were in Gaza on the people of Gaza.
SubhanAllah, SubhanAllah. Really horrifying stories. One of the things that we see from your social media is that during Ramadan, you were there when the ceasefire had broken, and you saw the aftermath of that. Can you talk us through what that experience was like and what you witnessed first 24, 48 hours when the ceasefire broke?
You know, I've been there for some of the worst mass casualty events of the war. I was there in June last year when they rescued the 4 Israeli hostages and they killed and injured 1,400 people in the space of 2 hours. And, you know, that was the height of the war before any ceasefire. And at that time, only 50 to 100 aid trucks were going in a day. Sometimes no aid trucks. But people were coming in dying of starvation then. We used to see kids. The images that you're seeing now, we were seeing that in June last year. And, you know, when they came and they destroyed and they rescued their 4 hostages, they killed so many people. And at that stage, because they'd just killed the World Central Kitchen workers and they just invaded Rafah, the Rafah border was closed. So no medical supplies had got in for 6 weeks. So we didn't even have sutures that were suitable for humans at the time. This was June last year. And this year, when the ceasefire broke, 200 children were killed in an hour and a half. 200. That was just children. And within about 30 minutes, the entire emergency department was full. And then it spilled over onto the street. And we were treating people on the floor. And we were just leaving people to die in a corner because we couldn't even get to them. You know, but one of the most amazing and remarkable things about that night, well, another thing to tell you is there's only one CT scanner as well. When you have a mass casualty event and you need to scan people and see where the shrapnel is, what injuries, internal injuries they have, there's one CT scanner, hundreds of people. People were dying on the CT scanner. People were dying waiting for a scan. Just a scan people were dying for. We would stabilize them, and as we were scanning them, people would die. When, one of the most remarkable things I remember about that night was we were outside on the streets and I was getting my ultrasound and I was scanning people's abdomens and seeing whether they were having any internal abdominal bleeding. And I remember looking up, and then a doctor came and he said, "Don't worry, we're here." And it was doctors that were at home, because remember, this was during the ceasefire. We only had 3 doctors on in the emergency department. And these doctors had walked in from their homes, sometimes walking kilometers to get to the hospital to help us, because they knew that we would be understaffed. And they came at night with drones overhead, bombings, leaving their families to come to the hospital, doctors and nurses. SubhanAllah, and I thought to myself, after 2 years of starvation and mass casualty event after mass casualty event, they're still willing to get up in the middle of the night, walk. Remember, no electricity. These streets are pitch black dark, with drones overhead shooting at people, walking for 2-3 miles to get to the hospital to give us a hand and help. I think that was one of the most remarkable things that I saw, was just how amazingly committed these doctors and nurses are in Gaza. They're the real heroes.
And no doubt during that 24 hours you saw some untold horrors. You saw, the reality of the situation in Gaza. There's no way we can do justice to all of the stories, but what's 1 or 2 kind of instances or incidents that still stay with you today?
Honestly, when working in the emergency department is different. As an emergency doctor, I'm not a surgeon. The surgeons, they get these mutilated bodies up to the theatre and they operate on them for 2, 3, 4, 6 hours. But when you're in the emergency department, you see everything. Everything comes in through that door. And we get children, the parents bringing in the children in plastic bags, melted bodies, organs, children with heads missing. I think there was a viral video when I was there, I don't know if you remember, but of a man carrying a headless child out the back of an ambulance. I was at the hospital there, I was next to him when he pulled him out of the van, and it was just this 2-year-old without a head. And, we had to give that body to the father who's just lost his wife and his other children. And then we presented to him his 2-year-old, the youngest child. Now look, I'm not a father, but I can imagine some of you here are fathers. And the youngest child always has a special place in your heart because it's the youngest and the most vulnerable one. And to hand a father 2-year-old's body with a head missing, so difficult. I remember there was one incident during a mass casualty event where a 9-year-old girl come in by herself. Now remember, there's panic and chaos. Ambulances are coming in. The grounds around the hospital are being bombed. Literally 50 meters away, things are blowing up and there's debris flying everywhere. This is what it's like in the north of Gaza. And all of these things are going on around you. Sirens are going off. Families are screaming and people are grabbing you and pulling you because there's only a few doctors and there's all of these patients. So they want you to see their child. They want you to see their father. And you're getting pulled left, right to go see this patient, go see that patient. And you can get really disorientated in a mass casualty event like that. And I remember as I went outside from the emergency department just to breathe and also deal with the people outside waiting to get in. And there was a 9-year-old girl and she was injured. She had blood trickling down the side of her face and her hair. And she was carrying a 3-year-old boy. It was her brother who was also injured and bleeding. Her whole family was killed. And she walked for kilometers by herself, carrying her brother to the hospital. That really, really struck with me. Because I thought to myself, what happened to this girl? Think about the strength that she has to see her whole family destroyed in front of her. Maybe she was under the rubble and she had to dig herself out and dig her brother. And despite all of this, with drones overhead, shooting people as they're walking through the streets, with bombs going off everywhere, she's walking in pitch black at night
no electricity, bombs going off everywhere, her brother injured and bleeding, and she's injured, and she walks to the hospital and she brings her brother to the hospital. And that motivated me, because I thought to myself, if this young girl, if she can overcome the fear to come all the way to the hospital to save her brother's life, if she's willing to do all of this to stay alive, to keep her brother alive, then we can't give up on them. Because if this child refuses to give up, we can't give up.
May Allah subhanahu make it easy for her and others like her, subhanAllah. One of the things you mentioned briefly was the psychological impact and the psychological warfare. One of the things that Islamic Relief does in Gaza, for example, is psychosocial support, and a lot of people don't understand the need for it. What kind of psychological trauma did you witness on children?
There are some children that I treated that night of the first mass casualty event when the ceasefire broke, and they still don't talk. I'm still in contact with their families. They still haven't spoken a word. They're that traumatized by what happened. You have to remember, I remember there was one girl, she's called Janine, and I'm still in touch with her family. Her house was bombed. 26 family members were killed. Right? She was asleep on the bed in her father's arms, and next to her was her sister. When they dug her out from underneath the rubble, she had a broken leg, and she had a skull fracture and an internal brain bleed. Her sister, who was sleeping right next to her, was cut in two. And her father, who held her, was dead. So her father was the one that saved her life, but still she had a brain injury and she had a broken leg. And I remember when they brought her into the hospital, and because we were so overcrowded and overfilled with patients, she actually remained in a tent outside with a broken leg. Now, when you've got a broken upper bone in your femur, it's a big bone, there's a lot of muscle around there, so the muscles pull at the bone if the bone's not in place. So the way that we have to treat something like this is we have to try and pull the bone back in position, or hold it in position while we're waiting for her to have surgery. And the way that we do that is we tie a weight to her leg, and we dangle the weight off the bed. I don't know if you've seen this before, and it's to pull, to create traction. So she had this traction, and we didn't have any weights, and we didn't have any string or anything like that. So we used some fluid bags. We tied a couple of fluid bags, and we put it around her leg, and we tied her leg, and we got a bit of traction. She was in this tent for days, slipping in and out of consciousness, because remember, she's got a skull fracture, brain bleed, and I would come see her every day. And to this day, she still doesn't talk. She's only just started talking a few words. But think about what she saw. She saw her sister cut in half and her father completely dismembered as he was pulled off of her when they grabbed her. That's just a normal child in Gaza. That's what they see and that's what they experience. I had a child where I went into a ward, and this was a ward with 3 kids, and it was very warm. There's no air conditioning. It's hot. So I opened the window, and as I opened the window, this kid jumped off from the bed and hid underneath the bed. And I said to his relative that was with him, I said, "What's wrong?" And he said that this kid has got burns all across his face. He's got a bandage all around there. He's had multiple surgeries for the burns across his face and across his body. I said, "What's wrong?" I only just opened the window. And he said that when his parents were killed, and the reason why he's got all these burns is because the window was open, and one of these quadcopters flew into the window, dropped a grenade in the house, killed his mother and father in front of them. He watched them burn alive, and he obviously got burnt as well. So he's scared now of being next to windows. So traumatized, he would rather sit in a hot room and be sweating than open the window. But this is the trauma that these kids have. And, before the war, it was something like 60% of children in Gaza had some form of some psychological trauma. 60%. Imagine what it is now. So, it is, even if it was to stop today, even if we were to rebuild Gaza, there's so much work that needs to be done.
These are one of the things that in any of these types of scenarios we often don't realize I mean, often people focus on food and things like that, but a child who has trauma doesn't have an appetite. A child who's going through psychological trauma doesn't even have the ability to eat, can't sleep. You know, there's no use trying to send a child to school if they have psychological trauma. So treating that is a very important part of the delivery, and something from the humanitarian angle, even if it's not in a war zone, is something that Islamic does in all of its orphan care programs, for example, because usually an orphan has some sort of trauma, and that's tied into a lot of the programs that we do. Now we're coming towards the end of this section. You know, you were there, you witnessed some of the untold horrors that, in all honesty, it's difficult for us even to hear listening to you right now, because what he's describing is the reality of someone's child and someone's mother and someone's father, but it's a story that we have to connect with. But you made a mission, you made a premise that you were going to come and tell the world about it. You know, beforehand, it's not as if you had connections in politics or you know, you were frequently invited onto TV. This was just something that you wanted to do when you came back, and you know, we saw that you were on Piers Morgan the other day, and you were able to put your case across very passionately, and you've been able to meet members of governments all around the world. No doubt you saw a lot of travesty, but there's something driving you to do that. And can you tell us what that is, and what's driving you to do that, and what can we learn from that for us when we feel helpless?
You know, look, in August this year in the UK, you all saw what happened with these race riots that went on after those 3 girls were murdered in Liverpool, and they blamed the Muslim community. And people just use that as an excuse to attack mosques, burn down hotels with asylum seekers. We've grown up, especially here in the West, especially my generation. You know, I went to school, I started secondary school in September the 5th, 2001. 1 week later, we had 9/11, September 11th, 2001. And after that day, things changed at school, things changed in the Muslim community, and things changed with the way that this country dealt with Muslims and the way that we were viewed in the public eye. And, you know, for me, there was no real intention for me. I didn't have this idea in my head while I was in Gaza that I was going to be campaigning or lobbying. All I wanted to do when I was in Gaza was trying to humanize the Palestinian people. I would tell their stories on social media, and a lot of people started following me while I was there in Gaza. I didn't think anything of it. You know, there's not very good Wi-Fi in Gaza. But when I got back to Australia, where I live in Perth, I was greeted by hundreds of people at the airport. And, you know, they were kids, not non-Muslim kids, who had drawn pictures and things like that and presented them to me. And I was overwhelmed with what people thought of just me just being there and just showing a story. I wasn't doing anything that other doctors weren't doing. I was just helping patients like every other doctor there. But what it showed me was there's an appetite now. There's an appetite here in society to tell the story of Muslims and to humanize Muslims. People are looking on TV screens and seeing what's being told about us, and they don't believe it anymore. They want somebody to tell us what's going on in the Muslim world. How do Muslims feel? And I just felt that, you know, I've grown up between 2 generations, as most people my age have. We've grown up between no social media and then social media and MSN and all of these things as we were growing up. But we were the last generation to know that when the lights come on outside, that's time to go home. That was, back then, that's what it was. You didn't have a mobile phone. You would go play for 5-6 hours. You didn't have a mobile phone. Your mum wouldn't know where you are, but you'd always come home when it would get dark. That was our generation. But then as we got older, we were the first generation to have social media in university. And I kind of felt like I understood both generations, and I felt like what we really need to do is we need to be able to communicate our story. And I think within the Muslim community, we don't value that very much. And that's all I wanted to do, was I wanted just to come across and just try and tell what it is to be a Muslim. What are our viewpoints on this? Because we have sat back, and yes, I know there's plenty of people that advocate for Muslims and there's plenty of prominent Muslim voices, but just generally as a community, we've sat back for so long that we've allowed 1 million Iraqis to be killed. We've allowed Libya to be bombed. We've allowed the genocide in Gaza to go on. Why? Because we're not willing to humanize ourselves to these people. As soon as 3 girls get murdered with no evidence, they blame the Muslim community, and look what happens. And we need to be better at telling our story. We need to be better at being on the forefront in here in the UK. We need to tell people who we are. We're the most generous community. We give back more than we take. We are doctors in hospitals. We are the businessmen that employ people. We're the taxi drivers that take everybody home safely. We do so much for the communities here, and yet from the way that we are as a culture and as a religion, we don't talk about it. But the problem is because we're not talking about it, we let other people tell our story, and these people are nefarious actors who don't have our best interest in hearts. And I just wanted it to be, whoever was to tell the Palestinian story, why not it be a Palestinian British doctor? A British doctor who's Palestinian, who's from Gaza, who has family in Gaza, my auntie, my uncle, my cousins. That's what we need to do. We need to take back our narrative. I didn't want other people to tell our story because they'll never do it justice. They'll never be able to tell the story of what it's like to be from Afghanistan and grow up there, or what it's like to be from Iraq or Somalia and what happened there. They can't tell the stories like we can tell the stories. They don't have the credibility that we have. They don't have the sense of urgency that we have. You know, we as a Muslim community, there's so many things that we do wrong. We would rather platform a non-Muslim and let them speak on our behalf than to talk ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with that. But we have to support our own voices. We have to echo our own voices and let the communities know that these are the people to talk to. We have to take power back. And this is the way to do it. The way to do it is to talk. And that's why I've just always said yes. Every time I wanted to do an interview with me, no matter how big or small, it was yes. And then it led and it accumulated to the point of which where I was invited to meet the Foreign Secretary of Australia, and I went and met with her. I've been in Parliament all this week, meeting with MPs. I've met with the President of Ireland and been invited to the Irish Presidential Palace. I've been on the BBC. I've been on Piers Morgan's show. But the reason why, you know, I don't want to be out, you know, it's a very scary place to be in the public eye.
What was it like to be on Piers Morgan? Because a lot of people here that wouldn't want to be in that hot seat. On a side note.
Do you know, there's a couple of things with Piers Morgan, right? I said to myself, you know, they wanted me to come on a week earlier and they wanted me to be on one of these debate panels and to talk about Iran versus Israel from a religious point of view. And I just said to him, absolutely not. I said to him, I'm a doctor that's been to Gaza. I've been to Gaza and I've got ideas of how we can help. I said, if you want me to talk to you, it's going to be one-on-one in the studio. That's how we're going to talk. And I told that to the producer and I was firm on that. And then the next week they messaged me and they said, can you come to the studio? He'll do a one-on-one with you. And that's what we did. And it really resonated. But again, it's because I'm not begging. I know what we bring to the table. I don't need them to give me, you know, a 30-second slot debating or this, that, and the other. No, you're going to respect us. You're going to give us 20 minutes and we're going to sit down and we're going to talk. And that's what it's about. We just need to take back control.
Yeah, and I'm sure people can agree here. If you haven't watched the interview, it's very, very well delivered, very well presented, and you were able to actually put the position of, from your position actually, and probably the thoughts of many people here across very, very strongly. So, and that's not an easy thing to do. Many people have gone. And what we see from that really is just a platform. That's all it is, and it's an opportunity to get your voice out. I want to finish with this because we're end of our section. We'll have if we have a short bit of time for Q&A. What's your kind of parting message or last message that you want to give to people here? The theme that I see going across the country, speaking to many Muslims, men, women, young, old, is feeling frustrated, feeling hopeless, feeling like there's not much that we can do, feeling that when we speak out we're going to get shunned if in a workplace or on social media, getting banned or whatever it might be, and then seeing what's happening in Gaza, it's getting worse. And you're somebody that has kind of speaking to the highest levels of power, but also seeing what's happening on the ground in Gaza. You know, what message can you give, or lasting message of hope can you give to people here? Because the number one adjective probably is like feeling hopeless.
Listen, it's okay to feel hopeless. I feel hopeless every day, and I'm speaking to members of parliament, and I'm speaking to presidents of countries, and you know, and I still feel hopeless. It's okay to have that feeling, but I think the main thing that you have to remember is none of this is happening without the will of Allah. None of this is happening without His knowledge and His consent. And you have to remember that Allah, they plan, but Allah is the best of planners. And it's not our duty to change the course, it's our duty to try. That's all our duty is. You know, the outcome, you're not judged on your outcome, you're judged on the intention. It doesn't matter if we all come out tomorrow and protest and lobby and do everything we can in our power and we don't save Gaza. The day of judgment, we're not going to be asked whether we saved Gaza or not. We're just going to be asked, what did you do? And that's all I said to myself was I need to do something. And that's what I'm doing. I'm just trying to do something. And everybody can do that. We don't have to have a successful result. People feel hopeless because they think, well, even if we do this, we're not going to free Gaza. That's fine. That's fine. But you still have to try. You know, when the trumpet for the day of judgment sounds, if Allah says, if you're planting a seed, continue planting it, even though you're not going to be around for its fruits, you still do it because we're not outcome driven, we're journey driven. And that's what we need to be. So instead of feeling hopeless, feel hopeful in Allah's will and Allah's plan and just do what you can.
Very well mentioned, and we say Jazakallah khair for Dr. Mustafa for giving his experiences, his words, and truthfully, those that are going through tribulation and trials, they are the successful. You know, we judge success by what we deem it to be, but actually success, Allah mentions, al-faizun, are those who stay true to the message, even if they perish, as we saw in Surah Al-Buruj. For a few minutes, inshallah, if Shaykh will allow, if there are any questions to be asked. I don't know what the facility is, if it's raising hands or... Okay, inshallah. And if there is, you can raise a hand and you can speak up and you can ask a question. Feel free to do so, don't be shy. And for the sisters, if you have a question, there are volunteers on your floor. If you let them know, there'll be a direct message sent to Shaykh and he'll be able to ask the question on your behalf. So please don't be shy in asking your questions. Bi'idhnillah, over to you.
Sorry, my question is, what happened in the flotilla? Because you're in international water. Obviously, before you guys even went there, the whole world was talking about it because of Greater Thunberg.
Yeah.
And after that, we never heard anything because you guys went missing.
Yeah.
We've been heard that you guys were kidnapped. And all they showed us was that they were giving out sandwiches, and that's it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know how much can you tell us, but what happened there?
Yeah, so obviously I helped the flotilla guys when they set sail, and I was with them until they got to international waters. You know, they were kidnapped 100 kilometers off the coast of Gaza, which is international waters, and they were taken by force into Israel. Now, the sandwiches that they gave them was obviously all propaganda, because as soon as the cameras were switched off, they had no food or very little food. They were given food that was rotten. They were given dirty water, and a lot of them were taken into solitary confinement when they got to Israel. And not only were they taken into solitary confinement, they weren't allowed to see lawyers. They threatened them, telling them that there were no lawyers were going to come for them, and they were going to stay in jail forever. But eventually, obviously, lawyers had to get involved, and that was about 3 days after they were there. But the conditions were so bad that they were put in that a lot of them had caught scabies when they were released. A lot of them had scabies, and they only spent a few days in jail. So you can imagine what it's like for people. I'm sure you've seen images of people who have come out of these jails, who've been in there for months, who have had scabies for months, what that does to your skin and body. If you don't know what scabies is, it's a parasite that burrows underneath your skin. So yeah, they were in a pretty bad condition, and you know, they were left in solitary confinement, and you know, a lot of them had to sign papers saying that basically they had committed a crime, forced confession, even though they committed no crime, because the UN said it is not illegal to bring humanitarian aid, and the blockade, the naval blockade of Gaza, is illegal. It's been illegal for 20 years for how long this naval blockade has been there. So they've had this illegal blockade. The UN have said that they should have right of passage. And what did the Israelis do? They came on international waters, kidnapped them, took the boat, and took them all into Israel, and then forced them to sign essentially a confession saying that they broke the law, and they went to Israel when they weren't going to Israel, they were going to Gaza. So it's what happened. But, you know, the flotilla, and then I was there in Italy last week, and I was there with the flotilla guys who are setting sail again tomorrow. to go to Gaza. The next flotilla is going. So, subhanAllah, these people, most of them on the boat aren't Muslim. And on this particular boat, it's the Hamdallah boat. There's about 3 Jewish people that are going, which to me is amazing that these people are going to literally risk their lives to help Muslim people. So, this is what I mean about saying that everyone has a role to play. And if they're able to sacrifice so much, then we should be able to do more as well.
I've got a political question coming from one of the sisters.
Yep.
I'll read it out. Said, I don't know how much you know about British Parliament here.
Yeah.
You've been meeting. Okay. The question is, with the Labour Party allowing Ben Gvir in and never giving sanction or boycotts the genocidal organization or the wider Israeli government, which political party would you vote for in the UK?
Look, this is a very, very difficult question to answer because, obviously the government here haven't done enough. That's the truth. The Labour government hasn't done enough, right? But at the same time, if you vote for independence and things like that, realistically, they can't do much either. This is the truth. And I'm telling you this as someone who's gone to Parliament and lobbied and spoken to different politicians. And I'll say this, but we managed to have a meeting with Jeremy Corbyn. Now, Jeremy Corbyn has led pro-Palestine movement for years. It's been amazing with this. And I presented to him a hospital that we wanted to get into Gaza. And he said, literally in the meeting, he said to his team, he said, I want you to write a letter today and send it to the Middle East envoy. We're going to ask this question on the Parliament floor and ask for your hospital to go into Gaza. We're trying to bring a hospital into Gaza. And he did that within 40 minutes. He had the letter ready to be asked and to prep the Middle East envoy that we're going to ask you this question and we want a response from you next week. When I started seeing politicians from the Labour government, they said to me, don't ever do that again. Because if anything comes from him, they won't listen. This is where we're in right now. So if I want to make a change, I have to play along with the Labour Party. I have to, work with the Labour Party because they're the government in power. And, there's a lot of semantics and wording and, are the government going to call it a genocide or they're not going to call it a genocide? To me, it doesn't matter what they call it, right? What matters is actions. And what we do as a community and as a group is we get so caught up on words when the reality is people are dying. We argue, we'll go on BBC with Piers Morgan or something like that, and we'll argue with him whether we call it a genocide or not. And all you've argued about for 10 minutes is a word of what to call it, and you've not actually argued the points that have happened. And this is where we get caught up in the political side of things as well, is we get caught up in politics and not in the reality of it. So, for me, who do you vote for? Who do you not? There's good points and bad points. You can empower your MPs within the government, i.e. within the Labour Party. There are MPs that are pro-Palestinian and are working. There's also independents who are going to make a lot of noise and who are going to force the issue on the shop floor. Voting for them is also worthwhile as well. But how would I vote? It's difficult because it really depends on your constituent. It depends who's the MP running in your thing. It depends who the options are. So, again, with the political side of things is you have to really understand the way that politics works. Everyone in the government, even Liberal Democrat, Conservative Party members are now speaking out against Israel. There's a few MPs on the Conservative side who said that they've got it all wrong and they apologise for their support of Israel for so long. Someone like that is of more benefit to us than, say, an independent who doesn't vote in Gaza's favour. So it's not really about who you vote for as a party per se, it's about the individual. And also you have to bear in mind that these parties do not work together. If the Conservatives came up with a bill, the Labour Party would not endorse it just because it came from, even if it's a good idea. Unfortunately, that's the reality of it. So, with regards to who to vote for and who not to vote for, it's your decision. But I'm just telling you there are good and bad points wherever you vote for. But if you want anything done, you have to work with the government in power. And the government in power is the Labour Party. So you have to work with them. Now, people might get angry at me for saying that, but that's the truth. They have the majority. They have the power. We can't get things done with independents. We can only get things done within the Labour Party. And if you spoke and sat down and spoke to an independent MP who ran on a Gaza ticket, they'll tell you the same thing. So it's one of those things. It's not to say never vote for an independent, because they are good. They bring issues to the heart of Parliament. But getting things done, there's one party that's in charge, and that's the party that we have to work with. And that's just the honest reality of it.
Allah fiqh, Jazakumullah khairan. We have a lot of sisters upstairs. Because so many questions, I'll just take one and then ask the brothers, inshallah. Someone wrote here, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you immensely in this world and also in the hereafter. But my question is that with this unimaginable horrors that you have seen and witnessed, how have you been able to cope with all these experience and looking after your own mental health?
You know, I mean, look, it's tough, man. Sometimes, you know, when I have interviews and stuff, I start breaking down. So I try not to go too deep into how I feel and things like that, because obviously I've probably not processed everything. But I also feel like a bit of an imposter, you know. These people in Gaza are going through this every single day. I've been there for a few weeks, and you know, people are always telling me, how are you coping? And I'm just like, forget about me, how are they coping? You know, I don't want the emphasis to be on me. So, you know, I appreciate people when they ask me that, but what I want the focus is on the people in Gaza. That's where the focus should be. And if we're not focusing on Gaza, we should be focusing on Sudan, on Yemen, on all of these other different places, on Syria, Lebanon. All of these places also need our attention as well. So, you know, look, I knew the risks when I went to Gaza, and some of those risks were going to be mental health issues and things like that. So for me, they're not issues. Do you know what I mean? The issue is Gaza. Let's stay focused on that.
Okay, brothers, go ahead. Ihsan, go. Speak louder, please.
Yeah. 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 No. Yeah. Yeah. So, just so everyone didn't hear, brother was asking is how do we educate people who don't necessarily know the full conflict or the history or the intervenes of the conflict? Look, I'll tell you this, unless they're like a really close friend that you can sit down with and have coffee with and dinner and talk for 2-3 hours and really break it down to them, trying to explain everything to someone that you're just mildly acquainted to is very hard. The way I look at it is this: if you're a 10 out of 10 about Palestine issues and they're a 5 out of 10, let's focus on the 5. Right? Don't focus on the 5 that they don't know. Focus on their 5 and your 10, and let's make it 15. Children are being killed and it's wrong. That's what they're saying. Focus on that. This has got the largest child amputees in the world. Kids are dying of starvation. Let's build common ground, right? I don't need people to come and be 100% on the same page that I'm on, right? It'll never happen. But what I can do is we can agree on certain things. Killing women and children is wrong. Bombing hospitals is wrong. Starving people is wrong, right? Work on what you agree on. Focus in on that and get them to be active on those areas. If bombing and killing children is wrong, let's focus on the children. Let's focus on giving charity to children's charities that help with these amputees. Let's talk more about how they've targeted children before in the past. Let's talk about the children that they targeted in the West Bank. Because ultimately, any entity that targets and kills children routinely is never the good guys. And they'll work that out for themselves. So focus on what you agree on with them, rather than focusing on trying to get them to your position. We don't need to win everybody in our position. We just need to focus on what everybody can see. And everybody already is disgusted at what they see. So just focus on that. And honestly, you'll win a lot more people over that way.
Sheikh, you have time for one? Or? Yeah. Okay.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. Alhamdulillah, may Allah make it easy for all that you've done for our community and the people of Gaza. My question is, inshallah, we have forerunners like you in our community, you're like doing the best what you can do with your profession and also empowering us. I think it's also duty for our community to kind of rally and back people like you in case, you know, they are trying their best on their other side to try and put down people like you. And it's a duty of our community to protect people like you. For example, you have like lawyers for Israel and the UK operating, backing them, and these people are trying their best to, you know, catch people in our community off guard and, you know, try to put them out of the limelight. So is there any organization, for example, in the UK, in the US, there's an organization called CAIR, you know, they kind of help out and provide legal support. As a community, should we be aware of any kind of, you know, organization which helps people like you? And should we be supporting them actively to enable forerunners like you to kind of be protected and also as a way for us to rally behind you?
You know, look, it's a good question. We don't have an organized defense union, shall we say. It's actually very scattered. You've seen so many doctors lose their jobs for talking about Palestine, and there hasn't been a rally from the Muslim community to get behind those doctors. You know, there's support with tongue in cheek, and people maybe commenting online and going, yeah, it's wrong, and this, that, and the other, but no one's supporting, you know, the actual thing. And I think that's something, like I say, about taking the power back into the Muslim community and being organized, you know, and getting becoming more involved in politics, becoming more involved in the community, raising our voices, being more prominent in actually showing what we do in the community. These things are all protective issues. But when we refuse to engage with media, you know, I got a lot of stick for people saying you shouldn't go on Piers Morgan, he's a genocide enabler, right? Okay, but it's his audience. Where shall I go? Shall I go to a left-leaning channel where I'm talking to the converted, I'm talking to people that already agree with me? I'm not going to win people over. And we have this thing in our community where, you know, when I started speaking out in Australia, right, the thing that really broke me through, that got me through to, you know, ministers and governors and senators, was I went on a podcast, and it was this reality TV star. It was a woman who was on The Bachelor, called Abby Chatfield, right? She's, you know, a dating reality TV star. She's very liberal in her views. Essentially, the Muslim community would not be very fond of going on a program like that, but it was her podcast. Now, 2 weeks before I went on her podcast, the Prime Minister of Australia was on her podcast. Now, we as a Muslim community, we will refuse to engage with her because we say, oh, you know, her way of life is different from ours, and therefore we can't bring ourselves there. But at the end of the day, we're the ones being genocided. They're killing our children. And you're saying we're too good to go talk to this woman who's the Prime Minister of Australia has gone on her show? Why can't I go on her show to talk about something halal, something respectful? So when we went on her show and I spoke to her, that was the day where 3 days later we had 12 senators reach out to us. Because what she did was, after the show, she wrote a letter and she asked all of her audience to sign this letter and write it and send it to their local MPs and senators to support our hospital that we were bringing in Gaza. Within 12 days, honestly, we couldn't cope with the amount of MPs and senators from all across Australia who reached out because of her. And this is what I mean about engaging. We just need to be more willing to engage. We're not better than anybody else. If people have a platform, let's use these platforms, because we at the minute do not have the same level of platform that they do. Let's borrow these platforms. If it's to talk and it's to benefit our community and it's to benefit the ummah, why not go on these platforms and talk about these things? You know, like I say, the people on the Flotilla, 3 of them are Jewish people on the Flotilla. I was there and I sat with them and I spoke to them. One of them calls himself a Palestinian. He says, my parents were born in Palestine, or it was Israel. They're Palestinian. I'm the son of Palestinians. I'm Palestinian. And the other guy is a Jewish guy from New York. He's called Jacob. He's a comedian. And when I spoke to him, he told me that his entire family have disowned him. Entire family don't talk to him. He wanted me to do some TikTok sketches with him. Now, I don't do TikTok stuff right here. But I thought to myself, like, if this guy's got 1 million followers and he wants to give me a platform to share his platform with me, and he's given up his entire family to support the Palestinian cause, then I can't start thinking to myself, oh no, we're above TikTok and making fun of ourselves and this, that, and the other. And that's the problem with us as a Muslim community, And as soon as somebody does something a bit different, the first thing we have is the haram police on them. Why are you doing this? Why are you going on this? When I was in Gaza, you know how bad it was? In Gaza, blockade, no food coming in or wherever. There was a shop round the corner from the hospital that sold some chocolates. And some of the chocolates were Snickers bars. And I bought a couple of Snickers bars. And I was eating a Snickers bar. And I posted a picture of the Snickers bar. And I captioned it, you're not you when you're hungry. Right? But it was to kind of just, use a common phrase that they have for it. But it was about the hunger in Gaza because, people weren't eating. And do you know the amount of messages I had from people saying, that's on the boycott list? And I remember thinking to myself, like, they're literally bombing the hospital right now. You know what I mean? I'm literally risking my life being here, and they're saying, oh no, you're not perfect. Because that's on the boycott. What do you want me to eat? What do you want these people to eat here? Do you know what I mean? Because, what I didn't show was a picture of the Coke can that I had with me as well. Do you know what I mean? They would have absolutely lost their minds. But, we were in Egypt as well the other day. I went on the march to return with Egypt, and Nelson Mandela's grandson, Chief Mandela, was there, and I met him. And obviously we talked about what we wanted to do, and I told him about the hospital that we had. And he said to me, look, we've got a hospital in Johannesburg. It's the Nelson Mandela Children's Hospital. We'll be happy to help you with your thing. So I thought to myself, great, I've got Nelson Mandela's grandson here, the historical links with Mandela, and amazing, right? And I posted a picture of me and him. Now, where did we meet? We met at a hotel, right? And we had dinner at the hotel, at the restaurant in the hotel. But the reason that we did have a dinner at the hotel and not out in, somewhere on the streets in Egypt was because the Egyptian government was going around arresting everyone. I don't know if you all heard about this. But we went on the march and they were just looking for people. They were arresting them in their hotels. They were arresting them in their hotels. So we wanted to go somewhere safe where the police wouldn't get us. So we went to this hotel where we thought we'd be safe because, he's a big figure that's leading this. The police are outside beating everybody, arresting people. And I posted a picture with him. Now, the bottles of water that were on the table were provided by the restaurant, but apparently they were part of the Coca-Cola company. Mate, this is Nelson Mandela's grandson, right? The guy and his family have given up so much for the hate and the abuse that we got for that. And I'm just saying to myself, I didn't even know this was a Coca-Cola product. It's bottled water in the desert. You know what I mean? Give us a break. Like, we're literally talking about, we're all flown out here to try and break the siege via land. And this is what I mean about, like, the Muslim community. We're more concerned about pointing fingers and telling people what you do wrong rather than focusing on what we're trying to do right. Like I said, if I'm a 5 out of 10 and you're a 7 out of 10, don't argue about the 2 out of 10. Let's be a 13 out of 10. You know what I mean? And that's what we need to start doing. Because you look at other communities, they don't tear themselves down like we do. Right? Yeah. You've also got to remember, and this is the delicate balances, we live in the West, we live in the UK. Whether you like it or not everybody is religious in the way that you want them to be. Not every Muslim in the UK here prays their 5 prayers a day. Some people coming to Salat al-Jum'ah is their thing for them, right? I don't want to discourage those people. Inshallah, they come and they start praying their 5 prayers a day like everybody else. But if we sit there and we just judge and point fingers and tell them how bad they are and how they're not doing enough and how they're not boycotting the correct way and all the rest of it, right? We lose them. And I don't want us to lose each other. I want us to bring us together. And this is what we've got to do. We've got to focus on what we do have in common rather than what we don't. And that doesn't just mean Muslims. It means non-Muslims as well. Let's be part of the communities here. Let's bring them in. Let's show them who we are. Yeah, that's
beautiful message. Just listening to you, this is a very important message to all of us, actually. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, Yadullahi ma'al jama'ah. Allah's help is with the jama'ah. وَمَنْ شَذَّ فِي. If you try to be different, isolated, then that's where you will be thrown into fire of Jahannam. You'll be all alone there as well. Just to add something, it's really interesting. There's one scholar of Egypt, his name is Shaykh al-Ghazali, not Imam al-Ghazali, Hujjatul Islam, but Shaykh al-Ghazali. Someone asking this question, Sheikh, what's your opinion about an individual that I know, he doesn't pray 5 prayers? The kafir, what's the verdict on him? He said, my opinion is that you take him to the masjid and invite him. And then he said something so beautiful. He said, let us become a da'i before we become a qadi. Be an inviter and don't become a judge. I'll take one more question from the brothers and one from the sisters, then I'm going to hand over to Atiq, inshallah ta'ala, because the adhan will be at 9:15. A sister is asking, have any Muslim countries have invited you to come and speak to the politicians or their media spokespersons?
So I've been in contact with the Jordanian government because the hospital that we want to build we're going to build it in Jordan, and then we drive it into Gaza. So I have been in contact with the Jordanian government. With regards to the other governments in the Middle East, it's a very touchy subject if I come along. But, look, my strategy is different. My strategy is to get Western governments on board because, the Indonesian hospital in Gaza was bombed and destroyed. Why? Because it's the Indonesian hospital. But if I had the British, Australian, Canadian hospital in Gaza and they bombed that would create huge diplomatic situation. So we want to change the narrative. And also as well, I want to provide access to our community here in the UK. It's the British hospital. The people that are going to be going is going to be British doctors and nurses and healthcare workers, and a lot of them are going to be Muslim. And it gives them access into it as well. We don't have to go through Israeli clearance. We go through our own government. And hopefully we can hold them more accountable than we can the Israeli government.
Where is the hospital going to be?
It'll be in Gaza. At the minute right now, obviously, with how many red zones are in Gaza, we haven't really decided on the location, but we have a neonatal and maternity hospital that's already ready and built and ready to go into Gaza. But the same infrastructure that built that hospital and the way we built that hospital, we've got plans for a pediatric hospital. But it's about getting the first one in. Once we get the first one in and we get the coalition of countries working together and talking between each other, then it becomes easier. Then it becomes the next one and the next one and the next one. And then it just becomes about funding and finding out who's willing to go and work. And, things hopefully will get better then.
Any more question? Last question. We have to give it to Atiq. He's got a very important announcement to make. Anybody have any other final question? Okay, last question. Oh, all right. I have to go on then. You go for it.
I mean, you've asked the question of how do we overcome the fear of actions, of doing something. Look, this is a personal choice that you have to make. Are you willing to sacrifice for Gaza? Are you willing to make a sacrifice for the Ummah? Because you might do something and you might lose your job. It's true. I know. Look, I'll give you an example. When I was in Gaza and we would have kids that were sick, and we were bagging and masking them, blowing air into their lungs. We had no ventilators in the ambulances, but we'd have to transport them to another hospital. Now, it's not UN approved and backed for me to get in the back of the ambulance and start bagging and masking a child. But if I didn't do it, I didn't know if the other doctors that were there had the capabilities to maintain the oxygen levels of this child. So I made the decision to go in the back of an ambulance and go and take this child. Now, the ambulance could be bombed. This happens a lot in Gaza. And I don't know exactly where we're going in the back of this ambulance, but I know this child will die if I don't maintain their airway. It's a decision. It's a decision. But it's tawakkul, right? It's what your intention is and just having tawakkul. You could do nothing and lose your job tomorrow. And, the way that my mum said this to me was when I said to her, I'm going to Gaza. And obviously, you have to get your mum's permission, your parents' permission, because it's a form of jihad going and treating these people. And I needed to get my mum's permission. And, she was teary, but she came back to me and she said, look, Hamada, she says, I'm going to let you go into Gaza. She said to me, death is in the hands of Allah. It's not in the hands of Israel. He said, I can say to you no, but tomorrow you could get run over by a bus. Tomorrow you could have a heart attack. And I've denied you, your reward to go to Gaza. Death is in the hands of Allah. And I think that was the thing that hit home with me. You have to have tawakkul. If you're going to do something, there might be consequences of it, but you have to accept Allah's will and qadr in this. To be paralyzed by fear, that's the worst thing that you can be, is be paralyzed by fear. So just leave it in the hands of Allah. Just have some tawakkul. You never know. I mean, look, I didn't know that I'd be where I am today. When I was in a hospital a few weeks ago being bombed, nobody knew who I was or anything like that. And then here I am in Parliament, speaking with parliamentarians. And, I've heard that Keir Starmer now knows about the hospital as well. I mean, it's gone from this to this. And why? Just a little bit of tawakkul. I'll just keep saying yes to these interviews and maybe something happens. Maybe something doesn't happen. Maybe I lose my job. But, at the end of the day, this dunya is it's fleeting. It's 50 years, 60 years, and it's all gone. You're probably 30 years old. How much of it is left? 40 years? Maybe less. At the end of the day, are we here for this dunya or for the akhirah? And if we're here for the akhirah, then, we have to accept whatever consequences. And remember, your sustenance is by Allah. It's not by your employer. If they don't give you a job, then they might cut off your money. Remember, your sustenance comes from Allah. It doesn't come from them.
Barakallah fikum. Brothers, no more questions, inshallah ta'ala. I'm going to pass over to Brother Atiq now, inshallah ta'ala. And as I normally call at 9:10, so the next 15 minutes I'm going to give it to Brother Atiq. Brother Atiq will, inshallah, over to you.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulullah. Hopefully, inshallah, 10-15 minutes of your time that I want to take, bi'idhnillah. Obviously, one of the things in the pushing narrative that we heard from our kind of reflection and reminder today, one of the things that Dr. Mustafa mentioned here was about tawakkul and having this reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya alladhina amanu kumu qawwamina bil qist shuhada'a lillah. Stand, O you who believe, stand firm in justice, witnesses for Allah. And these incidents and these situations that we're seeing around the world in Gaza today, we just celebrated the 30th anniversary, is the wrong word, but we just celebrated the 30th anniversary of the genocide in Srebrenica in Bosnia. 30 years. Islamic Relief was actually out there, and Sheikh Umar Suleiman was there, and Dr. Hani, our founder. They found remains of bodies recently, and they just buried them the other day. Now we're just looking back on what happened in Bosnia as history, and it was a genocide and memorials and all the rest of it. There's not much we can do for them other than dua and all the rest of it. But at the time, 30 years ago, many people here remember what was happening in Bosnia. And you remember donating and making dua and having speakers and eyewitness accounts and all the rest of it. At that time, many young people don't know about Bosnia. I ask you to read about it. I was a young child. Me and Mustafa are similar age, so we remember. But they were living in a genocide, and those that were living in that genocide, and there's many genocides, there's not just one or two. Reflect on what you can do at the time. We are living in a genocide, the most live-streamed genocide. I mean, there have been many genocides around the world, many hidden, many public, but this one is the first one which, is on your phone every day and on the news and all the rest of it. And so we have an opportunity to do something, and one of the things we can do is gain knowledge about it. That's why we're here today. We want to learn about it, hear eyewitness accounts from it, increase our iman from it. Anyone's iman was increased today by listening to this? Of course. We learn about Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel from the people who are preaching it and practicing it, like the people in Gaza. When you see a mother whose child is dead and they say, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, they are saying there is no power and there is no might but with Allah. We hear that and we don't really realize it. We see it through their actions and their words. And so these are the people that we have the opportunity to gain benefit from. We try to help them, but we need them more than they need us. That's the reality. What are they promised? Allah says, Lahum jannatun tajri min tahta al-anhar. People who go through oppression. In the Quran, in Surah Al-Buruj, there were people that were burnt in fire. Allah promised them gardens under which rivers flow. That's what they're promised. And so the opportunity that we have to care for them and gain from them, we talk about them, we advocate for them, we educate our colleagues about them, and where we can give our sadaqah or our zakah, we give for them. And as Dr. Mustafa very beautifully said, we will be questioned and asked about what Allah provided for us and what we gave from what He provided from us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran to give 1997, is supporting the communities. And in this emergency phase, as Dr. Mustafa mentioned, we were the largest deliverer of hot cooked meals through the World Food Programme. I think the number now sits around 30 million hot cooked meals that we've been providing. When the World Food Programme said there's no more food, no more fresh food to deliver, we also announced that we're not delivering any more food, and we removed it from our websites, and we don't actually collect for food, hot cooked meals anymore, because there is none. There's nothing going in. All the perishable items are gone, milk, cheese, all this kind of thing. So people are now relying on the canned foods, and they're still able to purchase within Gaza. And what we're able to do within Gaza is sponsor orphans, and we do that because we have a cashless system where we're one-to-one orphan support, meaning a donor in the UK is sponsoring them one-to-one. They receive it on a regular basis, and they're able to go out and purchase from the local market that they have. And the other thing that we do is we're running a maternity hospital, maternity clinic in a Sahaba hospital and a Khair hospital. And it's really good to hear about the inshallah future hospital that will be coming in. And supporting mothers who are going through essentially miscarriage, difficult delivery, cesarean operations. There's over a 350% increase in miscarriages from the statistics that I read in Gaza. And of course, the third thing that we're doing is providing them with psychosocial support. So for the 10 minutes that we have here, the Sheikh here has given us the opportunity to ask the community here, it's not going to be long, to see what you can do in this hour and this time to give to our people in Gaza. And I want to start by asking for those that have the ability to sponsor an orphan in Gaza. We can provide you, Brother Aziz is here, Brother Mashkur is here, they can provide you with our report, which is recent, as of just a few months ago, on the statistics, on the number of orphans, how we're caring for them, how we get that to them. But it costs £59 a month to sponsor an orphan in Gaza. It's about £708 a year. And what that allows us to do is be a custodian for that orphan. It allows us to have that transfer, as we mentioned, we have a digital non-cash transfer system. And for £59 a month or £708, you get a one-to-one orphan sponsorship. So you actually get, at the moment we don't have the ability to give you reports, but the moment that we're able to give you reports, we'll give you a report, the name, the image, the situation of the child, etc. But right now we still have over 8,000 orphans that we're sponsoring in Gaza. This is something, if you go on our website, you can see something that we are delivering. We are very open on what we can deliver, and we're very open on what we can't deliver. And so that is something that we have the opportunity to give, inshallah. And I want to ask, the Flotilla of looking after an orphan, we know is that the Prophet ﷺ said we'll be together in Jannah like this, he said, and put his fingers together. But I want to ask if there's anybody that wants to make a commitment for £59 a month, or it can be a one-off for £708 to sponsor an orphan in Gaza. This is a one-to-one orphan sponsorship that you will be taking care of, inshallah. There is one hand from the brother over here, mashallah. We say takbir. If there are any sisters, you can let the volunteer know, and Sheikh will let me know as well, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept it and bless it from him. We say ameen. Is there anyone else that wants to raise their hand, inshallah, and get the attention? That's the second person over there, inshallah. There's a third person over here. Brother over there, if you just go over there. That's three, mashallah. Takbir. Is there a fourth person, inshallah? There is a fourth person over here, mashallah. Takbir. Is there a fifth person, inshallah? As I said, the one-to-one orphan sponsorship, yes, there is a fifth, mashallah. Takbir. Is there a sixth person, bi'idhnillah, that wants to raise their hand and make a commitment? If there are any sisters, you can let the volunteer know. It can be a one-off if you want to give towards it, inshallah, or it can be regular. We prefer regular because it then means that, we don't have to come after you after a year and say, do you want to keep helping them? Any orphan that is donated by a person, but it's not direct debit, at the end of the year, you get contacted if you want to give it again. If you say no, we still cover it, but it's not really the right way. We want people to cover that, inshallah. Is there anyone else that wants to raise their hand? Our orphan sponsorship program, it includes during Eid al-Adha to give them qurbani, it includes Ramadan to give them the Ramadan food pack, and it also includes the psychosocial support, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Any orphan that is sponsored, as a byproduct, gets the benefit of all of the other projects that we run. Simply the one-to-one won't be enough. It's the core care that we give, and then they also receive all of the supplementary water, education, anything else that's happening in that area that we have the ability to deliver, inshallah. So there were 5 hands. Is there anyone else before I move on, inshallah? I'll ask once, I'll ask twice, bi'idhnillah. So I'm only going to make 3 asks because I just mentioned to you the 3 areas we're working in. But the last ask is for orphans. I'm going to ask one last time, inshallah, if there's anyone that wants to raise their hand and make a commitment. For anyone like myself that does sponsor an orphan, you will receive a report. It may not be immediate. Of course, we have to first categorize that orphan, and the ability of internet and all the rest of it in Gaza is difficult. But once you are on the roster and you get registered as an orphan sponsor, we say within 6 months, hopefully, inshallah, we can give you more details about that. There is a card machine here. If you don't, and you just want to raise your hand and say, I'll pay it next time, or give it to the imam, you can still raise your hand. At least we can get a form from you. So asking final time, inshallah, if anyone would like to sponsor an orphan in Gaza, inshallah, with a charity that is delivering there. We'll ask once, we'll ask twice, and then we'll move on, inshallah. The second thing I want to kind of make you aware of is, mashallah, there are 2 orphans sponsored from the sisters, mashallah. Takbir, takbir, takbir. And there is another one right at the back of the hall, mashallah. Takbir. I believe that's 8 in total. Is there anyone else? Because it means we can maybe get to 10, inshallah. But that's 8 people that have decided to sponsor an orphan in Gaza. You could pay off one-off. Of course, it's zakat eligible, but we always prefer direct debits. And just think about £59. It could be a sacrificed meal that you go out to a restaurant. I'm going to just do that once a month. I'm not going to think about it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide, inshallah. And we know that when we give in the sake of Allah, He always returns it manyfold. So is there anyone else that wants to give? It's 8. We could make it 9 and 10 if there's anyone else. If not, inshallah, I will move on. So again, is there any last person that wants to raise their hand? If not, inshallah, I will move on. Again, last opportunity for orphan sponsorship, bi'idhnillah. If not, again, one of the things that we're able to do, alhamdulillah, is support maternity clinics within hospitals in Gaza. And there are 2 hospitals that we have been working with, during Ramadan. We fundraise for this quite a lot. Alhamdulillah, I got a report, hopefully inshallah, as we can share it with the masjid, but it was a triplets that were, it was a complicated delivery to give birth to triplets, as you can imagine. Most of the times, if they're going through this trauma, they're either giving birth in crowded shelters or in the ruins of their home, because some people refuse to live in shelters and they'd rather live in their homes, or in the hospitals. Now, this mother had safely been able to give birth to 3 children because they were cared for in our maternity clinic, in our maternity hospital. It helps them with prenatal vitamins, ultrasound scanning, delivery, including emergency C-section delivery, and then post-delivery with nutrition as well, inshallah. And this is something which is really important. This project is especially important because these children are the future progeny of Gaza. Their existence is resistance, and what is happening right now is they're trying to force the people of Gaza to die by what? By starvation. And pregnant mothers who are starving can't give birth to healthy kids, if not kids that can survive at all, inshallah. So it costs, the cost of providing some of this care to these mothers is £250. We say £500 is the cost of providing all of the care, which is the prenatal, the C-section and the delivery. But just if we focus on the emergency medical care, not the whole package, it's £250. And that's the cost of providing that to a mother, assisting her in the delivery of a child, assisting her in the delivery of a baby. So I'm now going to ask, inshallah, if there's anybody that wants to make a donation or a zakat or sadaqah contribution of £250, which is going to go towards our maternal clinic project. These are helping pregnant mothers, breastfeeding mothers who need your help to deliver their children safely, without which that help they would, subhanAllah, unfortunately be left sometimes to give birth in very horrible and horrid situations, inshallah. So is there anybody that will raise their hand and make a commitment and say that I want to, inshallah, help our mothers of Gaza? We talked about our orphans. I'm going to ask if there's anybody that wants to make a contribution of £250, inshallah, to help in our maternal clinic in 2 of our hospitals, providing them at least at the crucial time of assisting them in the delivery of these babies, inshallah. Is there anybody that will raise their hand and make a commitment? And you can do so on behalf of your own mother, whether she is alive or passed away, or on behalf of your loved one. But this is an opportunity that you may not get anywhere else. These are crucial interventions that we have inside Gaza. And as I mentioned, I will ask our fundraiser to share some of the images of some of the babies that we've been able to deliver because of the support of those that you have given, maybe in some of the previous events and collections that we've done during Ramadan, etc. So is there anyone, even just one person, that will raise their hand and make a commitment, inshallah? There is one hand from the brother that wants to stand side by side with the mothers in Gaza. May Allah accept it and bless it and accept it from him. We say Ameen. Is there anyone else before I finish? I'm going to lastly ask for my last ask, bi'idhnillah, and I want as many people in the room, even if you haven't given already, to give towards this. Now, one of the things that Dr. Mustafa mentioned is the psychological trauma, the impact that this is having on children. I remember we have a folder from our team in Gaza. Whenever they get internet, they can upload. It's not every day, but whenever they get it. And it's a folder of every month in Gaza, and then it's a folder of every day in Gaza. And I saw images of the staff, many of whom have lost family members, wearing clown costumes, right? And they were kind of having like fun activities and games with the kids, etc. And honestly, all you saw was smiling children and laughing children and children that were having games and doing competitions and this kind of thing. And you might think, well, what's the need of that? Are they not starving? Are they not hungry? But I know, because I've seen this in many war zones, that this is sometimes the most important thing that you can do. Psychosocial support is allowing that child to overcome the trauma that they have gone through. allowing them to sit down. Many times it can even account for things like therapy and allowing these children to help in the limited capacity that they do. And that's done by our orphans care officers. They do that with the children. And providing the cost of that for one child is roughly around £50. And this is going to provide those children with that ability and the care to do so, inshallah. So my last ask as I finish, I think the time of Maghrib is coming soon. What time is Maghrib? Finished. Azan time now. So what I'll say, inshallah, is it's £50 to do so. I'll ask you just to raise your hands if you can contribute that. I'm not going to go through all of the hands, inshallah, but is there anybody that wants to make that contribution of £50 to provide psychosocial support? If you can, please, you can donate by card or you can donate on the form on your way out, inshallah. I'll finish this segment. I say Jazakallah khair for giving this opportunity, and the Salat al-Maghrib is being read.
Jazakumullah khairan, inshallah. Once again, I'll make another announcement after Salat al-Maghrib as well. A lot of brothers actually, they left. They're just doing wudu and coming back. So Hafiz Rahman, Faddal. Not all of them.